We have arrived. After 1,000 pages of Plato, we have reached the Republic, the main book. And now here's the part where I remember that I've completely forgotten to set up my OBS. Let me see. It's the one everyone talks about! Indeed. Let me see. Oh. Okay, wonderful. Never mind. It doesn't have a character list, so we don't have to do that. But let's get rid of the music, since I have no interest for music for this. Oh, wait. Hold on now. Alright, let me get another picture. Let me get a picture of Plato. Let's see. What picture should we go with for Plato? Let's just go with the School of Athens picture, I think. That's the classical one. School of Athens. That'll do. Oh no, it's kind of low res actually. Let me get a better one. This'll do. Copy, paste, OBS. This one. And let's go with this one. Can I zoom this out a little bit more? I can. There we go, that'll do. That'll do. Now we're ready. Alright, well, before we begin, let's get an idea of where we've come from. Most people read the Republic as their only work of Plato, or perhaps the Symposium, or the Apology, one of those three. But I've done it in a very strange manner where I've read virtually all of Plato, save for the Laws, the Timaeus, and the Critias, and then some other miscellaneous ones that aren't too important. So I should be pretty well prepared to read this, I hope. From what I do know about this, I know that it is, formally, it is about justice, the topic of justice, but in actuality it is a work on many subjects of the theory of forms and all sorts of ethics and Plato's utopian society. I have heard that it's not a very good utopian theory. It's sort of no utopian theories are very good, but let's withhold judgments on that and just sort of read the book and see if we can appreciate it. This is, as you can see from the title, 1 out of 10. This is going to take quite a while. It is traditionally broken down into 10 different books, each perhaps around an hour long, and I hope to get through these in some reasonable quick succession, but we'll see how it goes. I have deliberately avoided reading any kind of commentary on this book beforehand, because I feel that that would put too many ideas in my head. So instead, I'm just going to read this. Let's just sort of dive into it then. It's a short introduction at the beginning, as all these Plato works do, from the author. Not the author, the editor. The Republic. The Republic's ancient title, On Justice, much understates the scope of the work. It begins as a discussion of the nature of justice, much in the manner of Socratic dialogues like Laches or Charmides, with Socrates examining and refuting successive views of his interlocutors on the subject. But in Book 2, he renews the inquiry, now agreeing to cease examining and refuting the opinions of others, and to present his own account. He will say what justice really is, and show that people who are truly and fully just thereby lead a better, happier life than any unjust person could. The horizon lifts to reveal ever-expanding vistas of philosophy. Socrates presents his views on the original purposes for which political communities, cities, polis, were founded. the basic principles of the just and social and political organisation, and the education of young people that these principles demand. Speaking of books 2, 3, and 5. He decides that a truly just society requires philosophic rulers, both men and women, living in a communistic guardhouse within the larger community. The need for such rulers leads him on to wider topics. He discusses the variety and nature and proper regimentation of human desires and the precise nature of justice and other virtues, and of the corresponding vices, both in the individual person's psychology and in the organisation of political society. Speaking of books 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. He explains the nature of knowledge and its proper objects. Speaking of books 5 through 7. The world revealed by our senses, the world of everyday, traditional life, is, he argues, cognitively and metaphysically deficient. It depends upon a prior realm of separately existing forms, organised beneath the form of the good, and graspable not by our senses, but only through rigorous dialectical thought and discussion, after preparation in extended mathematical studies. There is even a discussion of the basic principles of visual and literary art and art criticism, Book 10. All this is necessary, Socrates says. Finally, to answer the basic question about justice, not what it is, but why it must make the just person live a good, happy life, and the unjust person a bad and miserable one. Hello, welcome, Polybius. Also, did I say hello, Nicola? I'm not sure I did. Oh, and NZ Pieface. Speaking throughout to no identified person, that is, directly to the reader, Socrates relates a conversation he took part in one day in the Athenian port city of Piraeus. All the others present, a considerable company, represent historic personages. Among them were the noted sophist and teachers of oratory, Thrasymachus, Glaucon, Adamantus, Plato's brothers. Glaucon is an ambitious, energetic, manly young man, much interested in public affairs and drawn to the life of politics. An intelligent and argumentative person, he scorns ordinary pleasures and aspires to higher things. Always especially attracted by such people, it was with him that Socrates had gone down to Piraeus in the first place. With how he says it makes the just happy and the unjust unhappy. I'm really curious how this work defines justice. Well, that's the entire book, indeed. That will be the entire book. What is justice? 250 pages of discussion. Maybe we will figure this out. Although, to be honest, I doubt it. Adamantus, equally a decent young man, is less driven, less demanding of himself, more easily satisfied, and less gifted in philosophical arguments. After Book 1, Socrates carries on his discussion, first with one, and then with the other of these two men. The conversation as a whole aims at answering to their satisfaction the challenge they jointly raise against Socrates' conviction that justice is a preeminent good for the just person. But Socrates addresses different parts of his reply to a different one of them. To assist the reader, we have inserted the names of the speakers at the tops of pages of the translation. Though, in books 2 through 10, Socrates no longer searches for the truth by criticising his interlocutor's ideas. He proceeds nonetheless in a spirit of exploration and discovery, proposing bold hypotheses and seeking their confirmation in the first instance through examining their consequences. He often emphasises the tentativeness of his results and the need for a more extensive treatment. Quite different is the main speaker in the late dialogues, Sophist, Statesman, and Philebus, and Laws. Whether Socrates himself, or a visit from Elea or Athens, there we get confident, reasoned delivery of philosophical results, assumed by the speaker to be well established. There's the end of the introduction. They're always very nice, those introductions, I find. Very motivating. But let's get straight into the book. And I assume that the people speaking here are Socrates and Cephalus. Probably beginning with Socrates as the first person speaker. But let's get into it then. Book 1. I always like the short introductions. The Greek plays I often read, they have very long introductions, like 100 pages long. It's ridiculous. I went down to the Piraeus yesterday with Glaucon, the son of Ariston. I wanted to say a prayer to the goddess, and I was curious to see how they would manage the festival, since they were holding it for the first time. I thought the procession of the local residents was a fine one, and the one conducted by the Thracians was no less outstanding. After we had said our prayer and seen the procession, we started back towards Athens. Polemarchus saw us from a distance as we were setting off for home, and told his slave to run and ask for us to wait for him. The slave caught hold of my cloak from behind. "Polemarchus wants you to wait," he said. I turned around and asked where Polemarchus was. "He's coming up right behind you," he said. "Please wait for him." And Glaucon replied, "All right, we will." Just then, Polemarchus caught up with us. Adamantus, Glaucon's brother, was with him, and so were Niceratus, the son of Nicias, and some others, all of whom were apparently on their way from the procession. Polemarchus said, "It looks to me, Socrates, as if you two are starting off for Athens." "It looks the way it is, then," I said. "Do you see how many we are?" he said. "I do." "Well, you must either prove stronger than we are, or you will have to stay here." "Isn't there another alternative? Namely that we persuade you to let us go?" "But could you persuade us if we won't listen?" "Certainly not," Glaucon said. "Well, we won't listen. You better make up your mind to that." "Don't you know," Adamantus said, "that there is to be a torch race on horseback for the goddess tonight?" "On horseback?" I said. "That's something new. Are they going to race on horseback and hand the torches on in relays? Or what?" "In relays," Polemarchus said, "and there will be an all-night festival that will be well worth seeing. After dinner, we'll go out to look at it. We'll be joined there by many of the young men, and we'll talk, so don't go, stay." "It seems," Glaucon said, "that we'll have to stay." "If you think so," I said, "then we must." So we went to Polemarchus's house, and there we found Lysias and Euphidamus, the brothers of Polemarchus, Thrasymachus of Chalcedon, Carmantides of Paeania, and Cleitophon, the son of Aristonymus, Polemarchus's father. Cephalus was there also, and I thought he looked quite old, as I hadn't seen him for some time. He was sitting on a sort of cushioned chair with a wreath on his head, as he had been offering a sacrifice in the courtyard. There was a circle of chairs, and we sat down by him. As soon as he saw me, Cephalus welcomed me and said, "Socrates, you don't come down to the Piraeus to see us as often as you should. If it were so easy for me to walk to town, you wouldn't have come here. We'd come to you. But as it is, you ought to come here more often. For you should know that just as the physical pleasures will wither away, my desire for conversation and its pleasure grows. So do as I say, stay with these young men now, but come regularly to see us, just as you would to friends or relatives." "Indeed, Cephalus," I replied. "I enjoy talking with the very old, for we should ask then, as we might ask those who have travelled a road that we too will probably have to follow, what kind of road it is, whether rough and difficult, or smooth and easy. And I'd gladly find out from you what you think about this, as you have reached the point in life the poets call the threshold of old age. Is it a difficult time? What is your report about it?" "By God, Socrates, I'll tell you exactly what I think. A number of us, who are more or less the same age, often get together in accordance with the old saying, 'God ever draws together like to like.' When we meet, The majority complain about the lost pleasures they remember from their youth, those of sex, drinking parties, feasts, and the other things that go along with them. And they get angry as if they had been deprived of important things and had lived well, but then, now, they are hardly living at all. Some others moan about the abuse heaped on old people by their relatives, and because of this, they repeat over and over that old age is the cause of many evils. But I don't think they blame the real cause. Socrates, for if old age were really the cause, I should have suffered in the same way, and so should everyone else of my age. But as it is, I've met someone who don't feel like that in the least. Indeed, I was once present when someone asked the poet Sophocles, "How are you as far as sex goes, Sophocles? Can you still make love with a woman?" "Quiet, man," the poet replied. "I'm very glad to have escaped from all that, like a slave who has escaped from a savage and tyrannical master." I thought at the time that he was right, and I still do, for old age brings peace and freedom from all such things. When the appetites relax and cease to importune us, everything Sophocles said comes to pass, and we escape from many mad masters. In these matters, and in those concerning relatives, the real cause isn't old age, Socrates, but the way people live. If they are moderate and contented, old age, too, is only moderately onerous. If they aren't, both old age and youth are hard to bear. Indeed, who goes up to someone and says, "How's your sex life, Socrates?" What is that? I admired him for saying that, and I wanted him to tell me more, so I urged him on. "When you say things like that, Cephalus, I suppose that the majority of people don't agree. They think that you bear old age more easily, not because of the way you live, but because you're wealthy. For the wealthy, they say, have many consolations." That's true, they don't agree. And there is something in what they say, though not as much as they think. Themistocles' retort is relevant here. When someone from Seriphus insulted him by saying that his high reputation was due to his city and not to himself, he replied that he had been a Seraphan, that had he been a Seraphan, he wouldn't be famous, but neither would the other, even if he had been an Athenian. The same applies to those who aren't rich and find old age hard to bear. A good person wouldn't easily bear old age if he were poor. But the bad one wouldn't be at peace with himself, even if he were wealthy. "Did you inherit most of your wealth, Cephalus?" I asked. "Or did you make it for yourself?" What did I make for myself, Socrates, you ask? As a money-maker, I'm a sort of mean between my grandfather and my father. My grandfather and namesake inherited about the same amount of wealth as I possess, but multiplied it many times. My father, Lysanias, however, diminished that amount to even less than I have now. As for me, I'm satisfied to leave my sons here not less, but a little more than I inherited. The reason I asked is that you don't seem to love money too much, and those who haven't made their own money are usually like you, but those who have made it for themselves are twice as fond of it as those who haven't. Just as poets love their poems and fathers love their children, so those who have made their own money don't just care about it because it's useful, as other people do, but because it's something they've made themselves. This makes them poor company, for they haven't a good word to say about anything except money. That's true. It certainly is. But tell me something else. What's the greatest good you've received from being wealthy? What I have to say probably won't persuade many people. But you know, Socrates, that when someone thinks his end is near, he becomes frightened and concerned about things he didn't fear before. It's then that stories were told about Hades, about people who have been unjust. Here must pay the penalty there. Stories we used to make fun of, twist his soul this way and that for fear they're true. And whether because of the weakness of old age, or because he's now closer to what happens in Hades, and has a clearer view of it, or whatever it is, he is filled with foreboding and fear. He examines himself to see whether he has been unjust to anyone. If he finds many injustices in his life, he awakens from sleep in terror, as children do, and lives in anticipation of bad things to come. But someone who knows he hasn't been unjust has sweet good hope, and is as his constant companion, a nurse to his old age, as Pindar says, for he put it charmingly, Socrates, when he says that when someone lives a just and pious life, sweet hope is in his heart, nurse and companion to his age, hope, captain of the ever-twisting minds of mortal men. That statement about them making poor discussion partners is still true. Indeed, there's one thing that is always, it never gets old, is that this book was written over 2,000 years ago. And yet, these people could be having this same conversation today, aside from the talk of having slaves and whatnot. It's strikingly modern. How wonderfully well he puts that. It's in this connection that wealth is most valuable, I'd say. Not for every man, but for a decent and orderly one. Wealth can do a lot to save us from having to cheat and deceive anyone, against our will, or from having to depart for that other place, in fear we owe sacrifice to a god or money to a person. It has many other uses, but benefit for benefit, I'd say, this is how it is most useful to a man of any understanding. A fine sentiment, Cephalus. But speaking of this very fine thing itself, namely justice, are we to say unconditionally that it is speaking the truth and paying whatever debts one has incurred? Or is doing these things sometimes just and sometimes unjust? I mean this sort of thing. For example, everyone would agree that if a sane man lends weapons to a friend and then asks for them back when he is out of his mind, the friend shouldn't return them, and wouldn't be acting justly if he did. Nor should anyone be willing to tell the whole truth to someone who is out of their mind. That's true. Then the definition of justice isn't speaking the truth and repaying what has been borrowed. It certainly is, Socrates, said Polemarchus, interrupting, if indeed we're to trust Simonides at all, who is a poet. Well then, Cephalus said, I'll hand that argument over to you, as I have to look over the sacrifice. So Polemarchus said, Am I then to be your heir in everything? You certainly are, Cephalus said, laughing, and off he went to the sacrifice. Then tell us, heir to the argument, I said, just what Simonides stated about justice that you consider correct. He stated that it is just to give to each what is owed to him, and it's a fine saying, in my view. Well now, it isn't easy to doubt Simonides, for he's a wise and godlike man. But what exactly does he mean? Perhaps you don't know. Perhaps you know, Polemarchus, but I don't understand him clearly. Clearly, he doesn't mean what we said a moment ago, that it's just to give back whatever a person has lent to you, even if he's out of his mind when he asks for it. And yet, what he has lent to you is surely something that's owed to him, isn't it? Yes. But it is absolutely not to be given to him when he's out of his mind. That's true. Then it seems that Simonides must have meant something different when he says that to return what is owed is just. Something different indeed, by God. He means that friends owe it to their friends to do good for them, never harm. I follow you. Someone doesn't give a lender back what he's owed by giving him gold, if doing so would be harmful. And both he and the lender are friends. Isn't that what you think Simonides meant? It is. But what about this? Should one also give one's enemies whatever is owed to them? By all means, one should give them what is owed to them. And in my view, what enemies owe to each other is appropriately and precisely something bad. It seems to me that Simonides was speaking in riddles, just like a poet. When he said what justice is, for he thought it just to give to each what is appropriate to him, and this is what he called giving what is owed to him. Well, what else do you think he meant? Then, what do you think he would answer if someone asked him, Simonides, which of these things that are owed, or that are appropriate for someone, or something to have, does the craft we call medicine give? Or to whom, what does it give them? Sorry, let me read that sentence again. That was very poor. A bit of a strange composition there. Simonides, which of the things that are owed, or that are appropriate for someone, or something to have, does the craft we call medicine give? Or to whom, what does it give them? It's clear that it gives medicine, food, and drink to bodies. And what owed or appropriate thing does the craft we call cooking give? And to whom, or what does it give them? It gives seasonings to food. Good. Now what does the craft we call justice give? Or to whom, or what does it give it? If we are to follow the previous answers, Socrates, it gives benefits to friends, and does harms to enemies. Simonides means, then, that to treat friends well and enemies badly is justice. I believe so. And who is most capable of treating friends well and enemies badly in matters of disease and health? A doctor. And who can do so best in a storm at sea? A ship's captain. What about the just person? In what actions and what work is he most capable of benefiting friends and harming enemies? In wars and alliances, I suppose. Alright. Now, when people aren't sick, Polemarchus, a doctor is useless to them, right? True. And so is a ship's captain to those who aren't sailing. Yes. And to people who aren't at war, a just man is useless. No, I don't think that at all. Justice is also useful in peacetime, then? It is. And so is farming, isn't it? Yes. For getting produce? Yes. And shoemaking as well? Yes. For getting shoes, I think you'd say. Certainly. Well then, what is justice useful for getting, and using in peacetime? Contracts. Contracts, Socrates. And by contracts, do you mean partnerships, or what? I mean partnerships. Is someone a good and useful partner in a game of checkers because he's just, or because he's a checkers player? Well, because he's a checkers player, of course. And in laying bricks and stones, is a just person a better and more useful partner than a builder? Oh, not at all. In what kind of partnership, then, is a just person a better partner than a builder or a lyre player, in the way that a lyre player is better than a just person at hitting the right notes? In money matters, I think. Except, perhaps, Polemarchus, in using money for whatever one needs to buy a horse jointly. I think the horse breeder is a more useful partner, isn't he? Well, apparently. And when one needs to buy a boat, it's a boat builder or a ship's captain. Probably. In what joint use of silver or gold, then, is a just person a more useful partner than the others? When it must be deposited for safekeeping, Socrates. You mean when there is no need to use them, but only to keep them? That's right. Then it is when money isn't being used that justice is useful for it. Yes. And whenever one needs to keep a pruning knife safe, but not use it, justice is useful both in partnerships and for the individual. When you need to use it, however, it is skilled vine pruning, or whatever, that's useful. Apparently. You'll agree, then, that when one needs to keep a shield or a lyre safe and not use them, justice is a useful thing. But when you need to use them, it is a soldierly or musicianship that's useful. Necessarily. And so too, with everything else, justice is useless when they are in use, but useful when they aren't. It looks that way. In that case, justice isn't worth much at all, since it's only useful for useless things. But let's look into the following point. Isn't the person most able to land a blow, whether in boxing or any other kind of fight, also most able to guard against it? Oh, certainly. And the one who is most able to guard against disease is also most able to produce it unnoticed. So it seems to me, anyway. Side note, what are they on about? And the one who is the best guardian of an army is the very one who can steal the enemy's plans and dispositions. Certainly. Whenever someone is a clever guardian, then, he is also a clever thief. Probably so. If a just person is clever at guarding money, therefore he must also be clever at stealing it. According to our arguments, at any rate. A just person has turned out, then, it seems, to be a kind of thief. Maybe you learn this from Homer, for he's fond of Autolycus, the maternal grandfather of Odysseus, whom he describes as better than everyone at lying and stealing. According to you, Homer, and Simonides then, justice seems to be some sort of craft of stealing, one that benefits friends and harms enemies. Isn't that what you meant? No, by God, it isn't. I don't know any more what I do mean, but I still believe that to benefits one's friends and harm one's enemies is justice. Speaking of friends, do you mean those a person believes to be good and useful to him? Or those who are actually good and useful, even if he doesn't think they are, and similarly with enemies? Probably. One loves those one considers good and useful, and hates those one considers bad and harmful. But surely people often make mistakes about this, believing many people to be good and useful when they aren't, and making the opposite mistake about enemies. They do indeed. And then good people are the enemies, and bad ones their friends. That's right. So it's just to benefit bad people and harm good ones? Well, apparently. But good people are just and able to do no wrong. True. Then according to your count, it's just to do bad things to those who do no injustice. No, that's not just at all, Socrates. My account must be a bad one. Let me take a sip of water. These are very weak arguments so far. Where was I? It's just, then, is it, to harm unjust people and benefits just ones? That's obviously a more attractive view than the other one, anyway. Then it follows, Polemarchus, that it is just for the many, who are mistaken in their judgment, to harm their friends, who are bad, and benefit their enemies, who are good. And so we arrive at a conclusion opposite of what Simonides meant. That certainly follows, Socrates. But please, let's change our definition, for it seems that we didn't define friends and enemies correctly. How did we define them, Polemarchus? We said that a friend is someone who is believed to be useful. And how are we to change that now? Someone who is believed to be useful and is useful is a friend. Someone who is believed to be useful but isn't is believed to be a friend but isn't a friend. And the same for the enemy. according to this account then, a good person will be a friend, and a bad one an enemy. Yes. So you want us to add something to what we said before about justice. When we said that it is just to treat friends well and enemies badly, you want us to add to this that it is just to treat well a friend who is good and harm an enemy who is bad. Oh, bugger. There's a fly in my room. Well, hopefully it'll find its way out. Right, that seems fine to me. Is it then the role of a just man to harm anyone? Certainly, he must harm those who are both bad and enemies. Hold on, this fly is in my face. This is very distracting. One moment. Get out of here. Excuse me. It's gone. It's gone. I just close the window so it doesn't get back in. There we go. Distractions gone away. Where was we? Talking about treating friends well. So, you want us to add something to what we said before about justice. When we said that is just to treat friends well and enemies badly, you want us to add to this that is just to treat well a friend who is good and to harm an enemy who is bad. Right. That seems fine to me. Is it then the role of a just man to harm anyone? Certainly, he must harm those who are both bad and enemies. Do horses become better or worse when they are harmed? Worse. With respect to virtue, that makes dogs good, or the one that makes horses good. Hello, Charlie, we're Respublicaring. And when dogs are harmed, they become worse in the virtue that makes dogs good, not horses. Necessarily. Then when we say the same about human beings too, that when they are harmed, they become worse in human virtue. Indeed. But isn't justice human virtue? Yes, certainly. Then people who are harmed must become more unjust. So it seems. Can musicians make people unmusical through music? No, that's impossible. Or horsemen make people unhorsemanlike through horsemanship? No. Well then, can those who are just make people unjust through justice? In a word, can those who are good people make people bad through virtue? They cannot. It isn't the function of heat to cool things, but of its opposite? Yes. Nor the function of dryness to make things wet, but its opposite? Indeed. Nor the function of goodness to harm, but its opposite? Apparently. I think they're using the word arete for virtue here. Sort of traditional Greek word. And a just person is good, indeed. Then, Polemarchus, it isn't the function of a just person to harm a friend or anyone else. Rather, it is the function of its opposite, an unjust person. In my view, that's completely true, Socrates. If anyone tells us, then, it is just to give to each what he's owed, and understands by this that a just man should harm his enemies and benefit his friends, he isn't wise to say it, since what he says isn't true, for it has become clear to us that it is never just to harm anyone. I agree. You and I shall fight as partners, then, against anyone who tells us that Simonides, Bias, Pittacus, or any other of our wise and blessedly happy men said this. I, at any rate, am willing to be your partner in battle. Do you know to whom I think the saying belongs to, that it is just to benefit friends and harms enemies? Who? I think it belongs to Periander, or Perdiccas, or Xerxes, or Ismenias of Corinth, or some other wealthy man who believed himself to have great power. That's absolutely true. All right. Since it has become apparent that justice and the just aren't what people say they are, what else can they be? While we were speaking, Thrasymachus had tried many times to take over the discussion but was restrained by those sitting next to him, who wanted to hear our arguments to the end. When we paused after what I just said, however, he couldn't keep quiet any longer. He coiled himself up like a wild beast about to spring, and he hurled himself at us as if to tear us to pieces. Polemarchus and I were frightened and flustered as he roared into our midst. What nonsense have you two been talking, Socrates? Why do you act like idiots by giving way to one another? If you truly want to know what justice is, don't just ask questions and then refute the answers simply to satisfy your competitiveness or love of honour. You know very well that it is easier to ask questions than to answer them. Give us an answer yourself, and tell us what you say the just is. And don't just tell me that it's the right, the beneficial, the profitable, the gainful, or the advantageous, but tell me clearly and exactly what you mean, for I won't accept such nonsense from you. His words startled me, and looking at him I was afraid. And I think that if I hadn't seen him before he stared at me, I'd have been dumbstruck. But as it is, I happened to look at him just as our discussion began to exasperate him. So I was able to answer, and, trembling a little, I said, Don't be so hard on us, Thrasymachus. For if Polemarchus and I made an error in our investigation, you should know that we did so unwillingly. If we were searching for gold, we'd never willingly give way to each other, if by doing so we'd destroy our chances of finding it. So don't think that, in searching for justice, a thing more valuable than even a large quantity of gold, we'd mindlessly give way to one another, or be less than completely serious about finding it. You surely mustn't think that, but rather, as I do, that we're incapable of finding it. Hence it's surely far more appropriate for us to be pitied by you clever people than to be given such rough treatment. When he heard that, he gave a loud, sarcastic laugh. By Heracles, he said, that's just Socrates' usual irony. I knew, and I said so to these people earlier, that you'd be unwilling to answer. That if someone questioned you, you'd be ironical and do anything rather than give me an answer. That's because you're a clever fellow, Thrasymachus. You knew very well that if you asked someone how much 12 is, and, as you ask, you warn him by saying, Don't tell me, man, that 12 is twice 6, or 3 times 4, or 6 times 2, or 4 times 3, for I won't accept such nonsense. Then you'll see clearly, I think that no one can answer a question framed like that. And if he said to you, What are you saying, Thrasymachus? Am I not to give any of the answers you mention, not even if 12 happens to be one of those things? I'm amazed. Do you want me to say something other than the truth? Or do you mean something else? What answer would you give him? Well, so you think the two cases are alike? Why wouldn't they be alike? But even if they aren't alike, yet seen to the person you asked, do you think him any less likely to give the answer that seems right, whether we forbid him or not? Is that what you're going to do? Give one of the forbidden answers? I wouldn't be surprised, provided that it's one that seems right to me after I've investigated the matter. Well, if I show you a different answer about justice than all these, and a better one, what would you deserve then? What else than the appropriate penalty for one who doesn't know? Namely, to learn from one who doesn't know. Therefore, that's what I deserve. You amuse me. But in addition to learning, you must pay a fine. I will, as soon as I have some money. He has some already, said Glaucon. If it's a matter of money, speak, Thrasymachus, for we'll all contribute to Socrates. I know, he said, so that Socrates can carry on as usual. He gives no answer himself, and then, when someone else does give one, he takes up the argument and refutes it. How can someone give an answer, I said, when he doesn't know it, and doesn't claim to know it? And when an eminent man forbids him to express the opinion he has, it's much more appropriate for you to answer, since you say you know and can tell us. So do it as a favour to me, and don't begrudge your teaching to Glaucon and the others. While I was saying this, Glaucon and the others begged him to speak. It was obvious that Thrasymachus thought he had a fine answer, and that he wanted to earn their admiration by giving it. But he pretended that he wanted to indulge his love of victory by forcing me to answer. However, he agreed in the end. And then said, There you have Socrates' wisdom. He isn't himself willing to teach, but he goes around learning from others and isn't even grateful to them. When you say that I learn from others, you're right, Thrasymachus. But when you say that I'm not grateful, that isn't true in the slightest. I show what gratitude I can, but since I have no money, I can give only praise. But just how enthusiastically I give it when someone seems to me to speak well, you'll know as soon as you've answered, for I think that you will speak well. Listen then, I say, that justice is nothing other than the advantage of the stronger. Well, why don't you praise me? But then you'd do anything to avoid having to do that. I must first understand you, for I don't know what you mean. The advantage of the stronger, you say, is just. What do you mean, Thrasymachus? Surely you don't mean something like this. Polydamas, the pancratist, who was a boxer, is stronger than we are. It is to his advantage to eat beef, to build up his physical strength. Therefore, this food is also advantageous and just for us who are weaker than he is. You disgust me, Socrates. Your trick is to take hold of the argument at that point where you can do it the most harm. Not at all, but tell us clearly what you mean. Don't you know that some cities are ruled by a tyranny, some by a democracy, and some by an aristocracy? Of course. And in each city this element is stronger, namely the ruler. Certainly. And each makes laws to its own advantage. Democracy makes democratic laws, tyranny makes tyrannical laws, and so on with the others. And they declare what they have made, what is to their own advantage, to be just for their subjects, and they punish anyone who goes against this as lawless and unjust. This, then, is what I say justice is. The same in all cities, the advantage of the established rule. Since the established rule is surely stronger, anyone who reasons correctly will conclude that the just is the same everywhere, namely the advantage of the stronger. Ah, now I see what you mean. Whether it's true or not, I'll try to find out, but you yourself have answered that the just is the advantageous, Thrasymachus, whereas you forbade that answer to me. True, you've added of the stronger to it. And I suppose you think that's an insignificant addition. I think that was Thrasymachus replying. It isn't clear yet whether it's significant, but it is clear that we must investigate to see whether or not it's true. I agree that the just is some kind of advantage, but you add that it's of the stronger. I don't know about that. Let's have a look into it. Go ahead and look. We will. Tell me, don't you also say that it is just to obey the rulers? I do. And are the rulers in all cities infallible, or are they liable to error? No doubt they are liable to error. When they undertake to make laws, therefore they make some correctly and others incorrectly. I suppose so. And if a law is correct, and a law is correct if it prescribes what is to the ruler's own advantage, and incorrect if it prescribes what is to their disadvantage. Is that what you mean? It is. And whatever laws they make must be obeyed by their subjects, and that is justice. Of course. Then according to your argument, it is just to do not only what is to the advantage of the stronger, but also the opposite, what is not to their advantage. What are you saying? The same as you. But let's examine it more fully. Haven't we agreed that in giving orders to their subjects, the rulers are sometimes in error as to what is best for themselves? And yet, it is just for their subjects to do whatever their rulers order. Haven't we agreed that much? I think so. Then, you must also think that we have agreed that it is just to do what is disadvantageous to the rulers, and those who are stronger, whenever they unintentionally order what is bad for themselves. But you also say that it is just for the others to obey the orders they give. You're terribly clever, Thrasymachus, but doesn't it necessarily follow that it is just to do the opposite of what you just said? Since the weaker are then ordered to do what is disadvantageous to the stronger. By God, Socrates, said Polemarchus, that's quite clever. Welcome to the stream, we are reading The Republic, the big book, where they are arguing over what justice means. We've currently got Thrasymachus here, asserting that it is the advantage of the stronger. The king is the one who determines what is just, and it is just, or something like that. 16, get out of it! I don't even think I was conscious of my existence at 16. I was playing RuneScape and Call of Duty. Let me drink some water. By God, Socrates, said Polemarchus, that's quite clear. I feel like this is all built on the assumption that it is the strong that rule, or maybe they're implying that the people are strong because they rule. I think they're going with the former. So I've seen this argument in Plato before, this sort of idea of this sort of natural wild law where the stronger are better, and then Socrates will often be arguing with someone who has that idea. So I'm guessing it's the former. He's probably going to break it down, and Thrasymachus is going to be very angry. If you are to be witness anyway, said Cleitophon, interrupting. Who needs a witness? If you are to be his witness anyway, said Cleitophon, interrupting. Who needs a witness? Polemarchus replied. Thrasymachus himself agrees that the rulers sometimes order what is bad for themselves, and that it is just for others to do it. That, Polemarchus, is because Thrasymachus maintained that it is just to obey the orders of the rulers. He also maintained, Cleitophon, that the advantage of the stronger is just, and having maintained both principles, he went on to agree that the stronger sometimes gives orders to those who are weaker than he is, in other words, to his subjects, that are disadvantageous to the stronger for himself. From these arguments it follows that what is to the advantage of the stronger is no more just than what is not to his advantage. But, Cleitophon responded, he said that the advantage of the stronger is what the stronger believes to be his advantage, that is, what the weaker must do, and this is what he maintained the just to be. That isn't what he said, Polemarchus replied. It makes no difference, Polemarchus, I said. If Thrasymachus wants to put it that way, let's accept it. Tell me, Thrasymachus, is this what you wanted to say the just is? Namely, what the stronger believes to be to his advantage, and whether it is in fact to his advantage or not, is that what you mean to say? Not at all. Do you think I'd call someone who is in error stronger at the very moment he errs? I did think that was what you meant when you agreed that the rulers aren't infallible, but are liable to error. That's because you're a false witness in arguments, Socrates. When someone makes an error in the treatment of patients, do you call him a doctor in regard to that very error? Or, when someone makes an error in accounting, do you call him an accountant in regard to that very error in calculation? I think that we express ourselves in words like that, taken literally. Do say that a doctor is in error, or an accountant, or a grammarian, but each of these, insofar as what we call him, never errs. So that, according to the precise account, and you're a stickler for precise accounts, no craftsman ever errs. It's when his knowledge fails him, and then he makes an error. In regard to that error, he is no craftsman. No craftsman, expert or ruler, makes an error at the moment when he is ruling, even though everyone will say that a physician or a ruler makes errors. It's in this loose way that you must also take the answer I gave earlier. But the most precise answer is this. A ruler, insofar as he is a ruler, never makes errors, and unerringly decrees what is best for himself and that his subjects must do. Thus, as I said from the first, it is just to do what is to the advantage of the stronger. All right, Thrasymachus, so you think I'm a false witness. You certainly are. And you think that I asked the questions I did in order to harm you in your arguments. I know it very well, but it won't do you any good. You'll never be able to trick me, so you can't harm me in that way. And without trickery, you'll never be able to overpower me in arguments. I wouldn't so much as try, Thrasymachus, but in order to prevent this sort of thing from happening again, define clearly whether it is the ruler and stronger in the ordinary sense, or in the precise sense, whose advantage you said it is just for the weaker to promote, as the advantage of the stronger. I mean the ruler in the most precise sense. Now, practice your harm-doing and false witnessing on that if you can. I ask no concessions from you. I ask no concessions from you, but you certainly won't be able to. Do you think I'm crazy enough to try to shave a lion or bear false witness against Thrasymachus? You certainly tried just now, though you were a loser at that too. Enough of this. Tell me, is a doctor, in the precise sense, whom you mentioned before, a money-maker or someone who treats the sick? Tell me about the one who's really a doctor. He's the one who treats the sick, of course. And what about a ship's captain? Is a captain, in the precise sense, a ruler of sailors or a sailor? A ruler of sailors. We shouldn't, I think, take into account the fact that he sails in a ship, and he shouldn't be called a sailor for that reason, for it isn't because of his sailing that he is called a ship's captain, but because of his craft and his rule over sailors. That's true. And is there something advantageous to each of these, that is, to bodies and sailors? Certainly. And aren't the respective crafts by nature set over them to seek and provide what is to their advantage? They are. And is there any advantage for each of the crafts themselves, except to be as complete and perfect as possible? What are you asking? This. If you asked me whether our bodies are sufficient in themselves, or whether they need something else, I'd answer, they certainly have needs, and because of this, because our bodies are deficient rather than self-sufficient, the craft of medicine has now been discovered. The craft of medicine was developed to provide what is advantageous to the body. Do you think I'm right in saying this or not? You're right. Now, Is medicine deficient? Does a craft need some further virtue, as the eyes are in need of sight, and the ears in need of hearing, so that another craft is needed to seek and provide what is advantageous to them? Does a craft itself have a similar deficiency, so that each craft needs another to seek out what is to its advantage? And does the craft that does the seeking need still another, and so on without end? Or does each seek out what is to its own advantage by itself? Or does it need neither itself nor another to its own advantage by itself? Hang on, I think I missed. Sorry, I skipped a line there. Excuse me. Or does it need neither itself nor another craft to seek out what is advantageous to it because of its own deficiencies? Is it that there is no deficiency or error in any craft? That it isn't appropriate for any craft to seek what is to the advantage of anything except that of which it is the craft? And that since it is itself correct, it is without either fault or impurity, as long as it is wholly and precisely the craft that it is. Consider this of the preciseness of language you mentioned. Is it so or not? It appears so. Medicine doesn't seek its own advantage then, but that of the body. Yes. And horse breeding doesn't seek its own advantage, but that of horses. Indeed. No other craft seeks its own advantage, for it has no further needs, but the advantage of that which is the craft. Apparently so. Now, surely, Thrasymachus, the crafts rule over and are stronger than the things which they are crafts. Very reluctantly, he conceded to this as well. No kind of knowledge seeks or orders what is advantageous to itself, then, but what is advantageous to the weaker, which is subject to it. He tried to fight this conclusion, but he conceded in the end. And after he had, I said, surely then, no doctor, in so far as he is a doctor, seeks or orders what is advantageous to himself, but what is advantageous to his patients. We agreed that a doctor, in the precise sense, is a ruler of bodies, not a moneymaker. Wasn't that agreed? Yes. So a ship's captain, in the precise sense, is a ruler of sailors, not a sailor. That's what we agreed. Doesn't it follow that a ship's captain or ruler won't seek or order what is advantageous to himself, but what is advantageous to a sailor, his subject? He reluctantly agreed. So then, Thrasymachus, no one in any position of rule, in so far as he is a ruler, seeks or orders what is advantageous to himself, but what is advantageous to his subject, that on which he practices his craft. It is to his subject, and what is advantageous or proper to it, that he looks, and everything he says and does for it. When we reached this point in the argument, and it was clear that his account of justice had turned into its opposite, instead of answering, Thrasymachus said this. Tell me, Socrates, do you still have a wet nurse? What's this? Hadn't you better answer my question rather than asking me such things? Because she's letting you run around with a snotty nose, and doesn't wipe it when she needs to. Why, for all she cares, you don't even know about sheep and shepherds. Just what is it I don't know? You think that shepherds and cowherds seek the good of their sheep and cattle, and fatten them and take care of them, looking to something other than their master's good and their own. Moreover, you believe that rulers in cities, true rulers that is, think about their subjects differently than one does about sheep, and that night and day they think of something beside their own advantage. You are so far from understanding about justice and what's just, and about injustice and all that, that you don't realize that justice is really the good of another, the advantage of the stronger and the ruler, and harmful to the one who obeys and serves. Injustice is the opposite. It rules the truly simple and just, and those it rules do what is to the advantage of the other and stronger. and they make the one they serve happy, but themselves not at all. You must look at it as follows, my most simple Socrates. A just man always gets less than an unjust one. First, in their contracts with one another, you'll never find, when the partnership ends, that a just partner has got more than an unjust one, but less. Second, in matters relating to the city, when taxes are to be paid, a just man pays more on the same property, an unjust one less. But when a city is giving out refunds, a just man gets nothing, while an unjust one makes a large profit. Finally, when each of them holds a ruling position in some public office, a just person, even if he isn't penalised in other ways, finds that his private affairs deteriorate because he has to neglect them, that he gains no advantage from the public purse because of his justice, and that he's hated by his relatives and acquaintance when he's unwilling to do them an unjust favour. The opposite is true for an unjust man in every respect. Therefore I repeat what I said before. A person of great power outdoes everyone. Consider him if you want to figure out how much more advantageous it is for the individual to be just rather than unjust. You understand this more easily if you turn your thoughts to the most complete injustice, the one who makes the doer of injustice happiest and sufferers of it, who are unwilling to do injustice, most wretched. This is tyranny, which, through stealth or force, appropriates the property of others, whether sacred or profane, public or private, not little by little, but all at once. If someone commits only one part of injustice and is caught, he's punished and greatly reproached. Such partly unjust people are called temple robbers, kidnappers, housebreakers, robbers and thieves when they commit these crimes. But when someone, in addition to appropriating their position, kidnaps, enslaves the citizens as well, instead of these shameful names, he is called happy and blessed, not only by the citizens themselves, but by all those who learn that he has done the whole of injustice. Those who reproach injustice do so because they are afraid of not doing it, but of suffering it. So, Socrates, injustice, if it is on a large enough scale, is stronger, freer, and more masterly than justice. And as I said from the first, justice is what is advantageous to the stronger, while injustice is to one's own profit and advantage. Blimey. Thrasymachus after reading Nietzsche once. Exactly. Having emptied this great flood of words into our ears all at once, like a bath attendant, Thrasymachus intended to leave, but those present didn't let him, and made him stay to give an account of what he had just said. I too begged him to stay, and I said to him, after hurling a speech at us, Thrasymachus, do you intend to leave before adequately instructing us, or finding out whether you are right or not? Or do you think it is a small matter to determine the whole way of life which would make living so worthwhile for each of us? Is that what I seem to you to think? Thrasymachus said. Let me drink some water after that big speech. Tries to leave, fails. His exit strategy foiled. Either that, or else you care for nothing for us, and aren't worried about whether we'll live better or worse lives because of our ignorance of what you say you know. So show some willingness to teach it to us. It wouldn't be a bad investment for you to be the benefactor of a group as large as ours. For my part, I'll tell you that I am not persuaded. I don't believe that injustice is more profitable than justice, not even if you gave it full scope and put no obstacles in its way. Suppose that there is an unjust person, and suppose he does have the power to do injustice, whether by trickery or open warfare. Nonetheless, he doesn't persuade me that injustice is more profitable than justice. Perhaps someone else here besides myself, feels the same as I do. So come now and persuade us that we are wrong to esteem justice more highly than injustice in planning our lives. And how am I to persuade you, if you aren't persuaded by what I said just now? What more can I do? Am I to take my arguments and pour it into your very soul? Oh, God forbid, don't do that. But first, stick to what you've said, and then, if you change your position, do it openly, and don't deceive us. You see, Thrasymachus, that having defined the true doctor, to continue examining the things you said before, you didn't consider it necessary, later, to keep a precise guard on the true shepherd. You think that, insofar as he's a shepherd, he fattens sheep, not looking to what is best for the sheep, but to a banquet, like a guest about to be entertained at a feast, or to a future sale, like a money-maker, rather than a shepherd. Shepherding is concerned only to provide what is best for that which it is set over, and it is itself adequately provided with all it needs to be at its best when it doesn't fall short in any way of being the craft of shepherding. That's what I thought it necessary for us to agree before, that every kind of rule, insofar as it rules, doesn't seek anything other than what is best for the thing it rules, and cares for, and this is true for both politics and both public and private kinds of rule. But do you think that those who rule cities, the true rulers, rule willingly? I don't think it. By God, I know it. But, Thrasymachus, don't you realise that in other kinds of rules, no one wants to rule for its own sake, but that they ask for pay, thinking that their ruling will benefit not themselves but their subjects? Tell me, doesn't every craft differ from every other in having a different function? Please, don't answer contrary to what you believe, so that we can come to some definite conclusion. Yes, that's what differentiates them. And each craft benefits us in its own peculiar way, different from the others. For example, medicine gives us health, navigation gives us safety, while sailing and so on with others. Sorry, I did that. Navigation gives us safety while sailing. Okay. Certainly. And wage earning gives us wages, for this is its function, or would you call medicine the same as navigation? Indeed, if you want to define matters precisely as you proposed, even if someone's who is a ship captain becomes healthy because sailing is advantage to his health, you wouldn't for that reason call his craft medicine. Certainly not. Nor would you call wage earning medicine, even if someone becomes healthy while earning wages. Certainly not. Nor would you call medicine wage earning, even if someone earns pay while healing. Indeed not. We are agreed then that each craft brings its own peculiar benefits. It does. Then whatever benefit all craftsmen receive in common must clearly result from their joint practice of some additional craft that benefits each of them. So it seems. And we say that the additional craft in question, which benefits the craftsmen by earning them wages, is the craft of wage earning. He reluctantly agreed. Then this benefit, receiving wages, doesn't result from their own craft, but rather, if we're to examine this precisely, medicine provides health, and wage earning provides wages. House building provides a house, and wage earning, which accompanies it, provides a wage. And so on with the other crafts. Each of them does its own work and benefits the thing it is set over. So if wages aren't added, is there any benefit to that the craftsman gets from his own craft? Apparently none. But he still has to provide a benefit when he works for nothing. Yes, I think he does. Then it is clear now, Thrasymachus, that no craft or rule provides for its own advantage, but as we've been saying for some time, it provides and orders for its subjects and aims at its advantage. That of the weaker, not the stronger. That's why I said just now, Thrasymachus, that no one willingly chooses to rule and takes other people's troubles in hand and straightens them out, but each asks for wages. For anyone who intends to practice his craft well never does or orders what is best for himself, at least not when he orders as his craft prescribes, but what is best for his subject. It is because of this, it seems, that wages must be provided to a person if he's to be willing to rule, whether in the form of money or honour or a penalty if he refuses. What do you mean, Socrates? Said Glaucon. I know the first two kinds of wages, but I don't understand what penalty you mean, or how you can call that a wage. Then you don't understand the best people's kind of wages, the kind that moves the most decent to rule, when they are willing to rule at all. Don't you know that the love of honour and the love of money are despised, and rightly so? I do. Therefore, good people, to rule for the sake of either money or honour, don't want to be paid wages openly for ruling, and get called hired hands, nor to take them in secret from their rule and be called thieves. And they won't rule for the sake of honour, because they aren't ambitious honour lovers. So, if they're to be willing to rule, some compulsion or punishment must be brought to bear on them. Perhaps that's why it is thought shameful to seek to rule before one is compelled to. Now, the greatest punishment, if one isn't willing to rule, is to be ruled by someone worse than oneself. And I think that it's fear of this that makes decent people rule when they do. They approach ruling not as something good or something to be enjoyed, but as something necessary, since it can't be entrusted to anyone better than, or even as good as, themselves. In a city of good men, if it came into being, the citizens would fight in order not to rule, just as they do now in order to rule. There it would be quite clear that anyone who is really a true ruler doesn't by nature seek his own advantage, but that of his subjects, and everyone, knowing this, would rather be benefited by others than take the trouble to benefit them. So I can't agree at all with you, Thrasymachus, that justice is the advantage of the stronger. But we'll look further into that another time. What Thrasymachus is now saying, that the life of an unjust person is better than a just one, seems to me to be of far greater importance. Which life would you choose, Glaucon? And which of our views do you consider truer? Well, I certainly think that the life of a just person is more profitable. Did you hear all the good things Thrasymachus listed a moment ago for the unjust life? I heard, but I wasn't persuaded. Then, do you want us to persuade him? If we're able to find a way that what he says isn't true. Of course I do. If we oppose him with a parallel speech about the blessings of the just life, and then he replies, and then we do, we'd have to count and measure the good things mentioned on each side, and we need a jury to decide the case. But, if on the other hand we investigate the question, as we've been doing, by seeking arguments with each other, we ourselves can be both jury and advocates at once. Certainly. Which approach do you prefer? The second. Come then, Thrasymachus. Come then, Thrasymachus, I said. Answer us from the beginning. You say that complete injustice is more profitable than complete justice. I certainly do say that, and I've told you why. Well then, what do you say about this? Do you call one of the two a virtue and the other a vice? Of course. That is to say, you call justice a virtue and injustice a vice. That's hardly likely, since I say that injustice is profitable and justice isn't. Then what exactly do you say? The opposite. That justice is a vice? No, just very high-minded simplicity. Then do you call being unjust being low-minded? No, I call it good judgment. You consider unjust people then, Thrasymachus, to be clever and good. Yes, those who are completely unjust, who can bring cities and whole communities under their power. Perhaps you think I mean pickpockets. Not that such crimes aren't also profitable, if they're not found out. But they aren't worth mentioning by comparison to what I am talking about. I'm not aware of what you want to say, but I wonder about this. Do you really include injustice with virtue and wisdom? And justice with their opposites? I certainly do. That's harder, and it isn't easy to know what to say. If you had declared that injustice is more profitable, but agreed that it's a vice or shameful as some others do, we could have discussed the matter on the basis of conventional beliefs. But now, obviously, you'll say that injustice is fine and strong, and apply it to all the attributes we used to apply to justice, since you dare to include it with virtue and wisdom. You've divined my views exactly. Nonetheless, we mustn't shrink from pursuing the argument and looking into this, just as long as I take you to be saying what you really think. And I believe that you aren't joking now, Thrasymachus, but you're saying what you genuinely believe to be the truth. What difference does it make to you whether I believe it or not? It's my account you're supposed to be refuting. It makes no difference, but try to answer this further question. Do you think that a just person wants to outdo someone else who's just? Not at all, for he wouldn't then be as polite and innocent as he is. Or to outdo someone who does a just action. Nope, he doesn't even want to do that. And does he claim that he deserves to outdo an unjust person and believe that it is just for him to do so? Or doesn't he believe that? He'd want to outdo him, and he'd claim that he deserves to do so, but he won't be able to. That's not what I asked, but whether a just person wants to outdo an unjust person, but not a just one, thinking that this is what he deserves. He does. What about an unjust person? Does he claim that he deserves to outdo a just person? Or someone who does a just action? Of course he does. He thinks he deserves to outdo everyone. Then will an unjust person also outdo an unjust person? Or someone who does an unjust action? And will he strive to get the most he can for himself from everyone? He will. Then let's put it this way. A just person doesn't outdo someone like himself, but someone unlike himself, whereas an unjust person outdoes both like and unlike. Very well put. An unjust person is clever and good, and a just one is neither. That's well put too. It follows, then, that an unjust person is like clever and good people, while the other isn't. Of course, that's so. How could he fail to be like that when he has their qualities, while the other isn't like them? Fine. Then each of them has the qualities of the people he's like. Of course. Alright, Thrasymachus. Do you call one person musical and another non-musical? I do. Which of them is clever in music, and which isn't? The musical one is clever, of course, and the other isn't. And the things he's clever in, he's good in. And the things he isn't clever in, he's bad in. Yes. Isn't it the same true of a doctor? It is. Do you think that a musician, in tuning his lyre and in tightening and loosening the strings, wants to outdo another musician, claiming that this is what he deserves? I do not. But he does want to outdo a non-musician. Necessarily. What about a doctor? Does he, when prescribing food and drink, want to outdo another doctor, or someone who does the action that medicine prescribes? Well, certainly not. But he does want to outdo a non-doctor. Yes. In any branch of knowledge or ignorance, do you think that a knowledgeable person would intentionally try to outdo the other knowledgeable people, or say something better or different than they do, rather than doing the very same thing as those like him? Hold on, when do we get to Republic 2? Oh, very soon, 3 more pages. Oh, perhaps it must be as you say. And what about an ignorant person? Doesn't he want to outdo both a knowledgeable person and an ignorant one? Probably. A knowledgeable person is clever. I agree. And a clever one is good. I agree. Therefore, a good and clever person doesn't want to outdo those like himself, but those who are unlike him and his opposite. So it seems. But a bad person and ignorant person wants to outdo both his like and his opposite. Apparently. Now, Thrasymachus, we found that an unjust person tries to outdo those like him and those unlike him. Didn't you say that? I did. And that a just person won't outdo his like, but his unlike. Yes. Then a just person is a clever and good one, and an unjust is like an ignorant and a bad one. Ugh, it looks that way. Moreover, we agreed that each has the qualities of the one he resembles. Yes, we did. Then a just person has turned out to be good and clever, and an unjust one ignorant and bad. Thrasymachus agreed to all of this. Not easily, as I'm telling it, but reluctantly, with toil and trouble, since it was summer, a quantity of sweat that was a wonder to behold. And then I saw something I'd never seen before, Thrasymachus blushing. But in any case, after we agreed that justice is virtue and wisdom, and that injustice is vice and ignorance, I said, all right, let's take that as established. But we also said that injustice is powerful. Or don't you remember that, Thrasymachus? I remember, but I'm not satisfied with what you're now saying. I could make a speech about it, but if I did, I'd know that you'd accuse me of engaging in oratory. So either allow me to speak, or if you want to ask questions, go ahead, and I'll say all right and nod yes and no as one does to old wives' tales. Don't do that, contrary to your own opinion. I'll answer so as to please you, since you won't let me make a speech. What else do you want? Now think, by God, but if that's what you're going to do, go ahead, and do it. I'll ask my questions. Ask ahead. I'll ask what I asked before, so that we may proceed with our arguments about injustice in an orderly fashion. For surely it was claimed that injustice is stronger and more powerful than justice. But now, if justice is indeed wisdom and virtue, it will be easily shown to be stronger than injustice, since injustice is ignorance. No one could now be ignorant of that. However, I don't want to state the matter so unconditionally, Thrasymachus, but to look into it in some way such as this. Would you say that it is unjust for a city to try to enslave other cities unjustly, or to hold them in subjection when it has enslaved many others? Of course, that's what the best city will especially do, the one that is most completely unjust. I understand that's your position, but the point I want to examine is this. Will the city that becomes stronger than another achieve this power without justice, or will it need the help of justice? If what you said a moment ago stands, and justice is cleverness, or wisdom, it will need the help of justice. But if things are as I stated, it will need the help of injustice. I'm impressed, Thrasymachus, that you don't merely nod yes or no, but give very fine answers. That's because I'm trying to please you. You're doing very well at that too. So, please be more by answering this question. Do you think that a city, an army, a band of robbers or thieves, or any other tribe with a common unjust purpose would be able to achieve it if they were unjust to each other? No, definitely not. What if they weren't unjust to one another? Would they achieve more? Certainly. Injustice, Thrasymachus, causes civil war, hatred, and fighting among themselves, while justice brings friendship and a sense of common purpose. Isn't that so? Let it be so, in order to not disagree with you. You're still doing very well on that front. So tell me this. If the effect of injustice is to produce hatred wherever it occurs, then, wherever it arises, whether among free men or slaves, won't it cause them to hate one another, engage in civil war, and prevent them from achieving any common purpose? Certainly. What if it arises between two people? Won't they be at odds, hate each other, and be enemies to one another? And to just people? They will. Does injustice lose its power to cause dissension when it arises within a single individual, or will it preserve it intact? Let it preserve it intact. Apparently then, injustice has the power first to make whatever it arises in, whether it is a city, a family, an army, or anything else, incapable of achieving anything as a unit because of the civil wars and differences it creates. And second, it makes that unit an enemy to itself, and to what it is in every way its opposite, namely justice. Isn't that so? Certainly. I'll drink some water as we get to the final stretch here. And even in a single individual, it has, by its nature, the very same effects first. It makes him incapable of achieving anything, because he is in a state of civil war, and not of one mind. Second, it makes him his own enemy, as well as the enemy of the just people. Hasn't it that effect? Yes. And the gods too are just. Let it be so. So an unjust person is also the enemy of the gods, Thrasymachus, while a just person is their friend. Enjoy your banquet of words. Have no fear. I won't oppose you. That would make most people hate me. Come then, complete the banquet for me by continuing to answer as you've been doing. We have shown that the just people are cleverer and more capable of doing things, while unjust ones aren't even able to act together. For when we speak of a powerful achievement by unjust men acting together, what we say isn't altogether true. They would never be able to keep their hands off each other if they were completely unjust. But clearly there must have been some sort of justice in them that at least have prevented them from doing injustice among themselves, at the same time as they were doing it to others. And it was this that enabled them to achieve what they did. When they started doing unjust things, they were only halfway corrupted by their injustice. For those who are all bad and completely unjust are completely incapable of accomplishing anything. These are the things I understand to hold, not the ones you first maintained. We must now examine, as we proposed before, whether just people also live better and are happier than unjust ones. I think it's clear already that this is so, but we must look into it further, since the argument concerns no ordinary topic, but the way we ought to live. Go ahead and look. I will. Tell me, do you think there is such a thing as the function of a horse? I do. And would you define the function of a horse, or of anything else, as that which can do only with it, or best with it? I don't understand. Let me put it this way. Is it possible to see with anything other than the eyes? Certainly not. Or to hear with anything other than ears? No. Then we are right to say that seeing and hearing are the functions of the eyes and the ears. Of course. What about this? Could you use a dagger or a carving knife, or lots of other things, in pruning a vine? Of course. But wouldn't you do a finer job with a pruning knife designed for the purpose than anything else? You would. Then shall we take pruning to be its function? Yes. Now I think you understand what I was asking earlier, when I asked whether the function of each thing is what it alone can do, or what it does better than anything else. I understand, and I think this is the function of each. All right. Does each thing to which a particular function is assigned also have a virtue? Let's go over the same ground again. We say that eyes have some function. They do. So there is also a virtue of eyes. There is. And ears have a function? Yes. So there is also a virtue of ears. There is. And all other things are the same, aren't they? They are. And could eyes perform their function well if they lacked their peculiar virtue and had the vice instead? How could they? For you don't mean if they had blindness instead of sight. Whatever their virtue is, for I'm not now asking about that, but about whether anything that has a function performs it well by means of its own peculiar virtue, and badly by means of its vice. That's true, it does. So ears too, deprived of their own virtue, perform their function badly. That's right. And could the same be said about everything else? So it seems. Come then, let's consider this. Is there some function of a soul that you wouldn't perform with anything else? For example, taking care of things, ruling, deliberating, and the like. Is there anything other than the soul to which you could rightly assign these, and say that they are its peculiar function? No, none of them. What of living? Isn't that a function of the soul? It certainly is. And don't we also say that there is a virtue of the soul? We do. Then, will a soul ever perform its function well, Thrasymachus, if it is deprived of its own peculiar virtue? Or is that impossible? It is impossible. Doesn't it follow, then, that a bad soul rules and takes care of things badly, and that a good soul does all these things well? It does. Now, we agreed that justice is a soul's virtue, and injustice its vice. We did. Then it follows that a just soul and a just man will live well, and an unjust one badly. Apparently so, according to your arguments. And surely anyone who lives well is blessed and happy, and anyone who doesn't is the opposite. Of course. Therefore a just man is happy, and an unjust one wretched. So be it. It profits no one to be wretched, but to be happy. Of course. And so, Thrasymachus, injustice is never more profitable than justice. Let that be your banquet, Socrates, at the feast of Bendis. Given by you, Thrasymachus, after you became gentle and ceased to give me rough treatment. Yet I hadn't a fine banquet. But that's my fault, not yours. I seem to have behaved like a glutton, snatching at every dish that passes, and tasting it before properly savouring its predecessor, before finding the answer to our first inquiry about what justice is. I let that go and turn to investigate whether it is a kind of vice and ignorance, or a kind of wisdom and virtue. Then an argument came up about injustice being more profitable than justice, and I couldn't refrain from abandoning the previous one and following up on that. Hence the result of the discussion, as far as I'm concerned, is that I know nothing. For when I don't know what justice is, I'll hardly know whether it is a kind of virtue or not, or whether a person who is happy, who has it, is happy or unhappy. That is the end of Book 1. And in actual fact, I don't think in the original book Plato intended for it to be broken down. I assume in some way he intended for people to read all 250 pages in one sitting. We're not doing that. Since that would probably take, let me think, if it took almost 2 hours to go through 1/10 of it, it would take 20 hours to go through the entirety of it. So that's a stretch right there. But good fun. What have we argued about? We've argued about what is justice. Knowing, who knows? See, if Socrates wrote it, I'd believe that Socrates wrote it in one sitting, ignoring the fact that Socrates didn't like writing. But I don't know about Plato. Well, what did we argue about? We argued about what is justice, and he argued that it was the advantage of the stronger. Socrates did not like that at all. What I'll do is I'll go through the book again very quickly, and I'll take notes on it to make it easier to pass. But that was Book 1. I'm hoping that I'll get through to the next 9 books in quick succession, and that'll be very good. Let me find this man here. I'm gonna raid into Don Koala after I finish with this 30-second ad, so I can appease my need for attention by seeing his reaction. Don't deny it. You all do it. What's he playing anyway? Total War Shogun. It's a Shogun stream. Alright, let's have a look. Raid. How do I do raid? I've raid. There we go. Don Koala Channel. Did I get it? I did get it. Alright, thanks for watching, and tune in for the next one, whenever that'll be. Hopefully soon. Hopefully soon will be good.